we're here to promote and encourage you to watch my new unscripted series. That's what they call it in the biz. Because, of course, there's no such thing as reality. My new unscripted series, my first, actually. I did try to get one made years ago, and it never happened. Billy Corgan's Adventures in Carnyland, which will debut on the 14th. All 8 episodes, 30 minutes each, on the CW streaming app. So the great thing about the CW streaming app is totally free. You don't have to have a cable provider. All you have to do is sign up, and that's it. It's not any more complicated than that. I'm definitely one of those people, like if I have to provide a cable provider, all that, I just skip it and I don't end up using it. So there's no excuse for not watching if you're interested, is kind of my point. Before I jump into the remarks, of course, at Madame Zuzu's on the 14th, whenever you see this, we're having a premiere, and some of the people from the NWA are flying in, so that'll be fun. We'll have a live Q&A hosted by Sylvie of ESPN, who's a good friend, and that should be a lot of fun too. And then afterwards, we're going to have a little bit of a shindig to celebrate. It's a big deal. And it's funny because, we're starting to roll out the press on this, and already you can see the hot takes rolling in. Why does a goth guy have a wrestling company, have a reality show? It's all kind of the same melange, in my opinion, which is we live in a different world than the one that I grew up in. And of course, an unscripted show is a great way to, in a sort of a long-form narrative way, explain why you're doing what you're doing, and hopefully entertain. And there was one headline today in the Chicago Sun-Times. My wife showed it to me, goes, we got this kind of snarky headline. They called the show Goofy in the headline. So I thought, that's kind of weird. And I started reading the article, and the person who wrote the article called it endearing and goofy. And so what they're really trying to say, because usually the people who write the headlines for articles aren't the people who write the articles, basically is that the show's kind of charming. It doesn't take itself too seriously. That's what I like about it. I'm your narrator for the show, which was hard work, but what was interesting is I was able to sort of explain things for each scene more specifically than, say, if somebody else just did it. So it's in my voice. I was a co-producer on the show, and so I had total control over the show. And I think what will surprise people, you might have seen this on my Instagram the other day if you follow me there. There's a lot of criticism of me in the show, and as a producer, I had every ability to remove any negative comment of me in the show. And I wanted those comments in the show because I wanted everyone to understand that trying to bring back a company as historic as the National Wrestling Alliance, there's a ton of different opinions, not just in the company, but outside the company, of what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong. Probably more argument about what I'm doing wrong than what I'm doing right, despite the fact that currently the NWA has 3 television deals, probably for the first time in probably over 30 years. But of course, everybody's got a hot take on what I'm doing wrong and how I'm doing it wrong and how I'm not from wrestling. I'm from this other planet called goth rock and roll or something. But the fact of the matter is when you see the show, you'll notice that it's not just kind of a monochromatic opinion. The NWA is great and I'm great running it. It's a diverse set of opinions, including people who work for the company. And I like that. I like that it's very real. And I think you'll appreciate, I hope, that the show is very, very organic. Nothing was faked for the show. Every conversation is real. We went out of our way to make sure that it wasn't staged or puffed up housewife fake, if you know what I'm talking about. This is very much a real show about what happens behind the scenes. It's probably the most revealing unscripted show about professional wrestling in the history of professional wrestling. It really does pull back the curtain on how a company runs. Of course, I know how the other companies run. I hear all about it behind the scenes. And a lot of that gossip gets out, but a lot of that gossip doesn't get out because it would be very damaging to the company. So I took an approach that was very open because I want people to not only sort of understand the struggle of trying to bring back this great company, but also understand that we're sort of fighting over something that we consider important. And that maybe if you don't even like what I'm trying to do with wrestling, you would appreciate that chasing this dream is ultimately what the show's really about. So it's a show about professional wrestling in the sense of trying to bring back a company, but the show's really about the people in the company. In colloquial terms, it's kind of an office show, meaning it's really what goes on in the office of the NWA. Of course, there's interactions with talent, and you get to see some of the great NWA stars, some that have left the building, so to speak. But I think you'll see that there's a real sort of human side to this whole thing. So if you're not a wrestling fan, it's not filled with 10,000 wrestling matches. It's really about the human dynamics of the company. So I hope you'll enjoy and appreciate that. So I'd like to answer these questions now. And again, thank you for being here with me. Okay, question 1. Can you tell us about any memorable moments or conflicts the viewers can look forward to? Well, I think I just kind of addressed that. There's definitely some issues going on between Kyle Davis, who's the outside ring announcer for the National Wrestling Alliance, and one woman close to my heart named Chloe Mendel. So Chloe and Kyle have a few sparks flying in the show, and it ain't romantic sparks. What do you hope the viewer walks away with after watching the series? What are you most excited for viewers to learn about you through the show? I think the comment that I've seen from friends who have watched the show is, and of course those friends know me pretty well, they're like, wow, this is how you actually are in real life. And I think people are going to be surprised. And of course I'm saying what they said to me. People are going to be surprised about how you are in real life. How you are in real life is not really how you are in the media, or how you are even when you're with the band. And I think that's exciting. I think it'll be nice for people to see, for once, after how many years I've been in public, over 30 years, for people to see my real personality. In something like this, I can act however I want to act. But over the course of a reality show, I think you get a good sense how I roll and how people deal with me. Despite my reputation, I think you'll see me interacting with lots of different people, and you'll see a real mutuality and partnership going on, which is very much similar to how the band's operated through the years. But most people don't know that because, of course, they read some article they said where I'm a mean guy with the pitchfork. Strangest part about filming a reality show. I've done it a few times. You just got to get used to the cameras being there. The minute you're conscious of the cameras, well, of course, that changes how you walk and talk. But that's really not what you want on film. You really want the real thing. So the best thing that happens is you forget the cameras are completely there, and you start talking junk like you always do and gossiping. And ultimately, like, oh, wait, there's a camera here. So that's how you know you've kind of gotten out of your head. How can we keep more episodes coming? Well, hopefully you watch. I mean, it's a binge watch situation, and I think that's the best thing is if you like the show, well, you can pretty much within a day or two run through the whole thing. I think the total amount of viewership would be 4 hours, right? 8 episodes times 30 minutes. They go pretty fast. If anybody's seen The Toys That Made Us or Disney Behind the Attractions, this is the same company that I made the show with, a company called Nacelle. They're great. They become good friends through making this, They become good friends through the making of the show process. That's no English, but I think you understand what I mean. It's television, right? It's all about who watches. We need lots of people to watch, and that would be the best way to be supportive. Secondarily, and I think this is, part of the magical part of the equation. Yes, it's a show about my life in wrestling, but to make the show work, it's contrasted by my life in rock and roll and my life behind the scenes and my life at Madame Zuzu's and, of course, my life with my wife and my kids. So it's just as much about my life as it is about wrestling. It's really kind of 50-50. And so for fans of my music or fans of the band, I think you'll find a lot in here that you'll enjoy. Of course, we've shown some clips. I'm sure some of you have seen those where James and Jimmy and Jack are talking about, wrestling and stuff like that, which is cool. And they were very nice to participate in the show. They didn't have to. I asked them, hey, will you do me a favor? And everybody was totally cool about it. James is very, very private, as you know. So for James to be in the show was really a real nice thing of him to do. But what I really want to encourage people to at least give it a chance is I've watched the numbers through the years. When I bought the NWA, of course, I started advertising, and people who are on the Pumpkin socials would be like, what does this have to do with the Smashing Pumpkins? Well, look, it's my business, and of course I want to promote what I'm doing. The conversion rate of a Smashing Pumpkins fans to an NWA fan hasn't been the numbers that I would have liked, but I can appreciate why. I mean, not everybody's a wrestling fan. Heck, my wife is not a wrestling fan, and she talks about that in the show. But at the same time, I think you're going to gain something from this show about me as a musician and about me as a person behind the scenes that you've never gotten from any other medium, pumpkin-related, media-related, MTV related to others. This is the most honest portrayal of me as a person. So I would appeal to you on that level if you're interested in me as an artist and as a person, where you're going to probably get more from this show than anything you've ever seen. And if I'm wrong about that, of course, write and tell us, but I don't think I'm wrong about that. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. And who knows, you might even start liking me. What should I expect watching it? Is it someone who doesn't like wrestling? Well, I think that's kind of what I said. But let me take that question at face value. I think the one thing I would encourage people to do, and this is, of course, the big thing always about wrestling. Well, isn't wrestling fake? When you see what these wrestlers go through in terms of what they put their bodies through, what they do to get themselves in shape, into the crazy shape that they get, and then you watch the injuries that happen in the ring, how dangerous the ring is in terms of how people position their bodies and these crazy things they do. When you get to know the people as real people like I do, and then you see what they put their bodies through, you can gain a sort of deeper level of appreciation for, let's call it, the stunt end of the work. I don't think anybody watches a movie and watches some incredible stunt like Fast and Furious and thinks like, who cares about that? That's the art of the game. So you might not like professional wrestling, but I think anybody can appreciate the art of the game. Because anybody that's really skilled at something that involves something that's really physical, I'm always impressed by. I certainly can't do it, and as I like to say sometimes on commentary, and then sometimes I'm on commentary for NWA Power, which is also on CW, the app, is you don't see me in there, and there's a reason. It really is a brutal physical sport. Did you and those near you enjoy the process, and would you do it again more? How did the band react to being filmed? I think I addressed that a little bit. The band was really cool about it and very supportive. Again, thank you to the boys in the band. And I did enjoy the process. I mean, producing a show, obviously through the years we've been the subject of a lot of things, but you kind of feel it's out of your control. So you end up kind of holding back a bit because you're not really sure how they're going to edit it. By being in charge of the edit and by being in charge of the show, I felt more free to be myself, and I think you see that, and I left a lot of that stuff in, including people being really critical of me, because I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting, It kind of belies this reputation that this is some sort of crazy controlled world. It's really not. Rock and roll is a lot more chaotic behind the scenes than you might imagine, and wrestling is even more chaotic. How do you think your show can impact the wrestling community? I would say to the wrestling community, and if anybody is here in the wrestling community, is I think it's an interesting look behind the scenes of what actually goes on in a professional wrestling company. The difficulty with a professional wrestling company, not too dissimilar to that of a rock band, is if you show too much behind the scenes, it kind of kills the gimmick. If you believe somebody's a rock star and then you see them golfing and yawning, it kind of kills the gimmick. Well, wrestling's the same way. If you're supposed to believe these people are superheroes, well, you don't want to know too much about their hurt toe. You know what I mean? It sort of goes against the grain. I hope people in the wrestling community appreciate the honesty and the earnestness of the show to pull back the curtain, but not in a way that's disrespectful. We're not trying to show all the magic tricks here. We're trying to show the effort that goes into putting on a show. The show starts, for example, of us doing Crockett Cup last year, which we're about to do in Dallas on May 18th. I fly out on Friday to go to Dallas for this big event that we're having in Dallas. Anyway, so it starts about a year ago at the Crockett Cup. Well, I'm not giving too much away, but we had some trouble selling tickets last year. It's not the most comfortable thing to kind of open up the curtain and say, hey, we really struggled to sell tickets to this event. Now, at that same day, I think across the street was a baseball game. The team was Wake Forest, maybe was in the College World Series, Winston-Salem. 10,000 people were sitting literally across the street watching the College World Series, at least a sub-game of the College World Series. And we were having trouble drawing people in the building. I hope people in wrestling can appreciate that we're telling that story not to make ourselves look bad. We're telling that story because we want people to understand that we're making our best effort, but things don't always go right. So it's really more about how we respond as a team, and how we navigate those 80 wrestlers in the back who want to go out and put a good show on, knowing that, there aren't as many people in the stands as we'd like to put on our best show. How did you come up with the name Adventures in Carnyland? Once I got really ensconced in the world of wrestling, I started calling my interactions with a lot of the wrestlers and a lot of the BS that goes on in the wrestling business Carnyland, in opposition to what I would always call problems in Pumpkin's World, Pumpkin World, or Pumpkin Land. Pumpkin World is probably more like Pumpkin World and Carnyland. So it's kind of a joking aphorism. It's like going to Disneyland. When I'm in Carnyland, different rules apply. Wrestlers rules apply. If you see the very open of the show, the animated open, I wanted to be a bit more complicated. It didn't work out because of budgetary reasons. But I really wanted to show what it was like to be in Carnyland. I always feel like I'm on some weird broken ride that I can't get off of. What's one thing people unfamiliar with professional wrestling should know about wrestling? I'll say this much. People in professional wrestling really, really, really love wrestling. It's hard sometimes to translate that emotional passion and quality to people who don't understand it. We in the wrestling community understand that people who aren't into it think it's some sort of alien thing that they don't understand. But remember, wrestling came out of the circus. Its true spirit is of the circus. And if you think of the circus, there's a lot of stuff in the circus that's pretty strange, right? Whether it's, the dancing elephants or the clowns, right? So wrestling was one part of that. It grew out of the idea of trying to stage fights to encourage people to think that the local hero could stand up to the big bully. And they used to make money by getting people to bet. That is literally the origin of professional wrestling. What you see on television, whether it's with WWE or AEW or the NWA, really started in a carnival hall with sawdust on the floor. It really comes from very, very humble origins. Its true purpose is to entertain. Simulated combat at the highest levels to create kind of like a living movie. And so I hope people would appreciate that. And I think you get a little bit of that show from the show. You'll sort of see behind the scenes the actual effort that goes in. It's less about what comes through the camera to the audience and more about how we view it from behind the scenes. What gave you the inspiration to make this? Well, I didn't really want to make a reality show. I had a meeting with Nacelle, the company that I made Carnyland with, and originally we were on the phone to talk about making possibly some toys for the NWA. At the end of the meeting, the president of Nacelle, Brian Volkweis, my partner in producing, started saying, "Hey, have you ever thought about doing a reality show?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't want nothing to do with reality show. I don't want any cameras in my life." And fast forward, a year later, he's still chasing me to make the show. And he really sold me on his vision of how the show could be beneficial to the NWA. And so that's why we're here. Ultimately, I was willing to open up my life and also ask Chloe to open up her life as well to try to create a different atmosphere around the NWA so we could get this brand across the line. Because at the end of the day, it's a very expensive endeavor to try to bring this company back. And at this point in time, as we sit here on May 13th, 2024, the company is 100% funded by me. I have no outside investors. So again, put that in perspective. I've rebuilt this company over the last 6 years with my own money, dealt with the slings and the arrows and the criticisms and the disgruntled talent that left and all this stuff, all out of my own pocket, all because I believe in it and all because I've got other people around me in my company that do believe in what we're trying to do. And now here we are sitting here on May 13th, 2024 with 3 television deals in our pocket and some real opportunities, including hopefully you watching and supporting this show. Any broadcast details involving Europe and Australia? Okay, I have some positive news there. One of the great things about Nacelle is because they've done other successful television shows, they have their own office for getting the show placed internationally. So I get the reports. They are out creating television deals around the entire globe. And so hopefully Carnyland will be available to everyone around the world on whatever their local provider would be, whether it be digital or broadcast. That's above my pay grade, but that's certainly part of how we're going to make this show successful, is bring it to the whole world. And hopefully it'll enter into the greater depth of syndication. How does it feel to show others deeper insight of your day-to-day life? I have to say it's a bit uncomfortable. I've always somewhat stage managed my personality. I've talked about that at different times through the years, but from the perspective of this, going to Chloe and saying, look, as part of this show, because of how this all works out, we're going to include the wedding as part of the show. And we had a really, truly beautiful wedding. But on some level, in the back of my mind that day as I'm getting married, I'm thinking about the cameras that are there and whether or not they're covering everybody that was there, including some of the professional wrestlers that are my friends. I was basically having to also produce a television show the day of my wedding. It's uncomfortable sometimes to ask your wife or your friends or your band, hey, please make room for this because this is important to me to try to explain what's really happening here. Because, again, the balance here of the NWA versus, let's say, the rest of my life sounds like a wrestling card, right? A grudge match. The NWA versus the rest of my life. professional wrestlers are part of my life on a day-to-day level. Some of these people are my friends. Some of them are my coworkers. Some of them are like uncles and aunties to my children. I mean, they know some of these famous professional wrestlers as people to hang out with. That's part of our life dynamic. So getting married and having them at the wedding is part of what we do. That's just what we do on a day-to-day level. How does one organize that many things professionally, personally at the same time? That's probably the number one question I get asked behind the scenes is how am I able to manage and write and record and tour for the band while at the same time I'm running the NWA full-time. On an average week, I'm probably working 120 hours. It's crazy. I mean, Chloe's very busy too. So, like, for example, I was up this morning at 4:30. I know that doesn't sound very sexy or glamorous, but yeah, I might be up at 4:30 and I might be going to bed at midnight. And I'm not saying I'm working every minute of the day, but every minute of the day I'm like trying to figure out all these things, including how to promote this show. How was it with camera and a crew in your home personal life? That was one advantage about producing the show is I had very strict guidelines, like you can come here, you can't go here. I think it's pretty well understood that Chloe and I are pretty private people. We're very public as far as Zuzu's goes, and obviously with my life in music and wrestling, there's a lot of public access there. So when you have that much going on over here publicly, you tend to be more reserved behind the scenes. And of course, we don't want too much going on with our children. We want our children to have a very, as much as they can, a neutral kind of home life. Yes, there's wrestlers and yes, there's rock stars and all this stuff going on. But at the end of the day, they're still little kids. We want them to feel that they're the most important thing, not, whatever's going on. So, the minute they see a camera, they start thinking they're going to be famous. That's the way their brains work. So make them famous. How did you pitch the show? Did they approach you? A little bit of insight on that. So Brian from Nacelle pitched me on his version of the show. That included how to get funding and all that kind of boring stuff. And so we actually went and pitched that show, and we got rejected. That show got rejected by everybody that we brought it to. So that seemed to be the end of the process. Brian and I got on the phone. He says, I really believe in this idea that this show with you in the middle of it can be successful. Are you sure there's nothing we can do? And I said, well, I'd be willing to take another crack at it, but I wanted to kind of do it my way. And he said, well, what's your way? And I said, I think the show needs to be more about this. And I highlighted different things than maybe what the original pitch did. I got more involved on putting the show together on a production level, and we went out and pitched that show, and then that show got picked up by CW. It's not easy because, quick version of it, when you're doing an unscripted show, you can sit there and plan all these things like, the NWA goes to the zoo and hilarity ensues. But at the end of the day, the thing that's most valuable may not be that the NWA wrestlers are at the zoo, feeding peanuts to the elephants. It might really have to do with a squabble going on between two people over something that seems very small, but sort of belies a bigger problem. So you do these kind of setups like wrestlers at the wedding, wrestlers at Siamese Dream 30th anniversary concert, the beautiful charity event we did here in Highland Park, HB Cares for Cooper. You can kind of create the dynamics, let's call it the canvas by which you're going to paint the show, but it's really the little things that you can't imagine. One of my favorite moments in the show, and there was an edit where they had missed this part, and I asked for it, and we got the footage from, I think it was the local ABC 7 affiliate. We did the HP Cares for Cooper, and for people who don't know, Cooper Roberts, severely injured in the July 4th incident here in Highland Park, paralyzed from the waist down, a really, truly heartbreaking, tragic situation. So we wanted to raise some money for the family, but also raise awareness for, Cooper's desire to, get better and hopefully one day walk again. And after the show, I sat with Keely Roberts, Cooper's mom, and she said that was the first day since the incident where it just felt like her kids got to be normal kids again, and they had such a fun time watching the NWA show. And then after that, Keely and I went and talked to the local ABC thing, and there's an interview where Keely's talking to the camera about what the show did for her. And there's just that moment of me standing next to a mother who's been through so much, and her being so open and her heart so open in talking about what we were able to do together with this event. That's in the show. So it's just that little snippet, right? But it says so much about how people working together, even through tragedy, can do good things. At that moment, it's not about the NWA. It's not about me as a person. It's about this family and what they're going through. And I was just blessed to be part of it. And you can almost see my face, and I start to cry during the thing because I'm just so overwhelmed. Because I'm in showbiz. You know, we do lots of crazy, silly, fun stuff. And occasionally you come face to face with, let's call it, what your good works engender in the world. It's very humbling, because that's when all the rock star BS goes out the window, right? And I'm telling you, it was the same for the wrestlers. They were very moved that day. A few more questions. Did you learn anything from the show's experience that will lead to inspire new SP music? No, my wrestling life and my Pumpkins life really don't meet at all. I mean, we use some of my music for NWA and stuff like that. And I think, you know, a lot of the wrestlers who weren't necessarily fans, I wouldn't say they're now fans because I'm their boss, but I think they've grown to appreciate that the effort that it takes for the band to be this successful over this many years. I've kind of gotten this different respect in the company because by putting those things together, like we did with World is a Vampire, by doing some shows at some of wrestling shows at some of our rock shows, you see this kind of like, wow, there's a lot of effort here too. I never realized behind the scenes, because it's the same thing. Wrestlers don't always understand what goes on behind the scenes to put on a good rock show. Top 5 most important wrestlers of all time. That's a toughie. Dusty Rhodes for sure, Ric Flair for sure, Hulk Hogan for sure. It gets complicated after that because you get into influence. Gorgeous George, you could argue, was one of the most important wrestlers because he ushered in, let's call it the entertainment era of wrestling on television. And I would go 5th, I would go Mildred Burke, because she broke down the barrier where when she started wrestling in 1937, and as some of you know, I own Mildred's original title from 1937. It's quite an honor to have that title. When Mildred was the champion starting around 1937, there were a ton of states in America where women were not legally allowed to wrestle. So if she stepped foot into a wrestling ring, she would have been arrested for breaking the law. I mean, that's just crazy if you really think about it. Because a lot had happened by 1937 in America. We're not talking about 1837, we're talking about 1937. This is post-World War I, just before World War II, or America's entry into World War II. So imagine that in this country, in many states, and I think Illinois was one of those states, New York too, a woman could not legally wrestle professionally. They were denied that. So Mildred Burke, great champion, broke down all those barriers. And so total credit to her. Last show. What are some reality TV shows that WPC enjoys? Well, I didn't watch any this year. We usually take kind of a vacation after Christmas, and that's our time to watch a bunch of junk, unscripted shows. I would have to say, is it 90 Day Fiancé? Is it where they meet and then or is it Marriage at First Sight? They're kind of the same show. It's the one where you meet and you get married, or you get married and then you meet, something like that. I actually knew somebody went on one of those shows, and it was really sad because the person got married and actually fell in love with the person, and then found out that the person that they married only did it for the money, and I guess they pay you to get divorced at the end. So you basically, they almost encourage you to get divorced, and they'll pay for it, and you get money, and so anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this chat. I know that the admin for SP World had said that there were going to be questions probably after the show airs tomorrow on May 14th. So let's try to do a follow-up chat if that's all right with everybody and you enjoyed this. And I'd be happy to answer questions from what you saw in the show, because of course we want to keep it going. And please, if you enjoyed the show, please share how much you enjoyed the show and encourage others to watch, because particularly for those music fans and for those, let's call it non-wrestling fans, if you enjoy the show as a show that entertains you and wrestling was only a subtext to that, please explain that to people who are your friends, because of course we want people to watch that show. it won't help me at all if people watch the show 6-9 months from now and they go, oh, how did I not know that I was going to enjoy the show? Really, now's the time to try to get people to show up and watch, because we do really want to get to a second season. And now that I know how the show goes, I think the second season would be even more fun and more interesting. We do lots of cool stuff. And who knows, we'll get James E. Hot in a wrestling ring one of these days. All right, God bless everyone. And I make a little promise. If we get to a follow-up Q&A, I'll share some information on the new Smashing Pumpkins record, which is almost completely done. And when you say, wait, you're talking about the 33-song rock opera. No, this is a brand new record, very much a rock, old-school Smashing Pumpkins record. So I'll share some information about that record when we talk next. God bless you. Thank you so much.